Well, my name's Chris. I front the WA black metal band Deadspace. We've been around for a fair while now, about 9 years or something. Few years of laying low, sort of in between. Got a new record out. So basically, when we decided to stop laying low, we started making music again. We put an EP out last year. The new album, The Dark Enlightenment, came out on November the 3rd. Um, Sort of marks a long-term change in direction that we've been sort of working at since 2019, but we've just upped the ante on the shift a little bit. So, if you're into heavier, more avant-garde, death metal, black metal infused kind of stuff, more than the ever so popular atmospheric side of black metal at the moment, then you might be into the new record over what we've done in the past.
Beautiful, Chris.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today, mate.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me.
No worries. So you mentioned Deadspace released your latest album, The Dark Enlightenment, back on November the 3rd, mate. So she's been out about 5 weeks now. How's the early response been?
It's been pretty slow, but definitely positive. We haven't received much slapback for it. But in the genre that we're in, it's quite normal for things to grow on people, and it's also quite normal for people to listen to the music and really not say a lot. So we never really put much out expecting a huge response, or especially from a sales point of view. We're not really selling it. We're selling the physicals. So basically, yeah, it's been good. Yeah, I think that a lot of people are appreciating where it's going, and I'm sure that there's a lot of people that have absolutely no clue whatsoever that there was even an album out, and that's just that's the nature of the beast. It's like, well, how do you want to do things? Do you want to be that ever annoying band that just floods people's feeds with stuff that is eventually just going to annoy the hell out of them, or do you want to wait for the music to sort of discover the people, if that makes sense?
Oh, it does indeed. Now, you sort of touched on this a bit earlier, bro, but tell us a bit more about the album from a musical point of view and what you were going for with it.
um So to understand the concept of this album, it makes sense to sort of understand how the fabric of the band has shifted in general, and where the source material of this album kind of comes from. So like a big step in what we've been doing as a band is like depersonalizing the stuff that we write a lot. So it's not necessarily dealing with the emotions of a singular person, or basically sensory based feelings or anything like that. Basically it looks at the human condition as a collective, like as a whole. And what we've started to do, which has given us a lot more, what's the word, it's given us a bit more scope in terms of you know concepts and things that we can explore, is we take basic ideas that are either neutral ideas, maybe good ideas, maybe bad ideas. So we're talking more philosophical kind of concepts at this point, and sort of exploiting them for everything that they're worth. Talking about the impact that has, or that may have, on the surrounding kind of ethos of what it means to be human, and how we fit or don't fit in the spectrum of the earth in general. So basically the album tracks come from the period that we were writing the EP songs. Well, I basically get the ball rolling with the beginning of everything, and we put some stuff aside. It fit really well on the EP. We washed out the production a lot on the EP and made it a bit mysterious and murky, because it was meant to be sort of a prelude for what was to come. And certain tracks were a little bit more on the hard hitting side, that we didn't really think fit that little EP. So what we did is we kind of split those materials. It was about, we could have made it an album, but we decided not to. We decided to split it to 5 tracks, and we kept the other 4 tracks or something that we had for sort of skeletons for the record. And at the time, I was living in Belgium with my wife, so we didn't have a lot of contact as a band. And I sort of like fleshed out half of the record, I think, while we were over in Belgium, and then we moved back to Australia in January this year. Um, so that's kind of when we sat down and kind of finalized it, and I started showing the guys where it was going and what we were going to do with it, talking a little bit more about the concepts and that sort of thing. So yeah, to sort of get, it's kind of like a continuation of the EP, where the EP kind of predicts like this sort of apocalypse that's already in motion. And then what the album seeks to do is maybe look at some theories or some ideas, about why that may already be in motion and what is avoidable and what's not avoidable. So yeah, it's a bit of a strange one. It's hard to explain.
So along those lines, mate, like, would you say overall it's an album of hope or despair?
Definitely despair. So it's yeah, it's a bit difficult to pinpoint it. There's not much hope in it whatsoever, but as as I was sort of alluding to before, the idea of it is to explore concepts. So in saying that, when you put out a record that has it sort of illuminates consequences of certain actions or thinking or whatever, then we are talking specifically to that condition in itself, not saying that there isn't joy and hope and these kind of things in life, but basically we've taken in a way a philosophical theory here, which is Nick Land's work. He's a bit of a cooked unit, and I love the way he writes because it's super, for philosophy, it's super artistic. It's almost like you're reading like old Nietzsche stuff, which is exactly why he gets absolutely flamed by the philosophy community, because it's not the most sound philosophy. But yeah, it's very interesting, like some of the ideas that he posits, and in his opinion, the only hope is turning to things like music. And things where there is still some kind of semblance of nonconformity and expression left. Um, so it's not to say that there's no joy in what we do, and that we're at a point where we don't enjoy it, or we don't enjoy life, or we don't enjoy certain aspects of what we do. It's more that we're basically analyzing this status that he adopts quite rigidly and saying, look, like, a lot of these ideas are extremely interesting and you can trace them back to being plausible. It's quite certain that there is not as much room to move, in terms of personal freedom anymore, that everything is becoming gridded down, and that there are probably various reasons for that may be more complex than the sort of mythical nature that he approaches it in. But yeah, it very specifically deals with that idea and this kind of feeling that the world is in a way going to shit on a grand scale. And that's something that I think is pretty difficult for anyone that's been alive for a while to ignore. The world is changing for better or for worse. It depends what you're into. If you're in the market of developing AI products and things like that, and you're that kind of creative entrepreneur, I mean, what a time to be alive. But if you're someone that prefers a not completely but a slightly more traditional way of life, then it's a little bit of an uprooting in itself there. Yeah.
Sure. Sure. Now, you've released the singles Fanged Numina and Culminating Chaos. Like, if that's all someone's heard from the album, would you say that's a good representation of what to expect?
With Culminating Chaos, definitely. That was the first track we had ready. The song hits with a bang. It's the biggest maybe pivotal, exhibition piece for the record, that it made it very clear. It's like, this is not what you've heard, from what we were doing 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago. And I think that was the whole point of it. Yet there is still something in there that kind of ties it back to the EP that we put out earlier. So I think that was a very conscious choice. The Fang Numina one was that we had, so the way that I see it is the two really like iconic, like the most iconic songs on the record are Culminating Chaos and definitely Discoisia, which is the fifth track. And that one sort of, it combines elements of everything that we've always done, but shines like a new light on it, how it all comes together in this new machine that we've sort of developed. It's a songwriting style that we sort of have adopted here. And we needed something in between for that because, in terms of track releases, we don't want to give away the two most iconic songs at the beginning and, then just drop the rest of the album, and the rest of the album, it makes sense. So we threw a little bit of a curveball in there, which was to basically put out the song on the record that's the most simplistic and the most sort of tied into like traditional black metal. In a way, sort of to throw people off a little bit. Culminating Chaos has that really eclectic kind of like heavy vibe, and then you've got a band like us that's always been kind of more on the melodic side, and then we throw out something like Fang Numina, which is basically like a 90s Norwegian black metal track in a way with underlying elements that somehow make it unique. But in a way, it's really like a meat and potatoes kind of song, and we put that out there as like an interim thing because, in my opinion, it's still a great track. But it's pummeling. It kept the momentum up, getting ready for Discoisia to come out right before the release date. And yeah, obviously, I think all the songs on the record are great. It's actually the first record I've turned around afterwards and gone, okay, there's not one bit of shit on this record. Most other records we've done, there's been a track or two or the whole album that I've turned on within a couple of months of it being out. And some of that is the tediousness of promoting and all of that stuff, which is also why we've slowed down with that. Like I don't want to be sitting there looking at stats and, pushing ads all the time. And, it's just not what music's about. And it's, well, not to us anyway. I mean, I understand from like an industry point of view, but really when we dissolved, when we took that break from the band, all of us just, we kind of realized when we started talking and we got back together that none of us really cared about being part of the industry anymore. We're doing it because we love it. We love playing music. It's great. We've got a good fan base already. If that grows, that's fantastic. If it doesn't grow, then it's not meant to be. And we're happy with what we've built over the last 9 years. Possibilities of being able to get out to the States and do tours. They'd be cool in the future, but we'd also be quite selective of what we do because we got to a point where we burnt out for a reason, man. Like that 2019 was jam packed. Like we were in Japan, Europe. We did the Satyricon tour for DAL. It was just like a whole year on the road, and after that, like it pushed my guitar player Tom, who's basically like my right hand man in this project. Like him and I call the shots, and it pushed him to go, man, I can't keep doing this. I need to go do an apprenticeship or get my life sort of in order. And we just said, okay, well, for that reason, we'll take a back seat. And, we sort of put it on ice for a bit. And what we want to make sure that we don't do is do that again. So we realized it was, we lost a lot of, not momentum because I mean, fuck momentum really. It's music, but we lost a lot of, like familiarity with like what we did, and we had to sort of reestablish that in a good way, which is it's nice, but to do that twice I think it would be too exhausting. So for us it's about longevity. It's about still being here in 10 years in some kind of way, shape or form, and not succumbing to sort of having to pull the pin at any point because of any external pressures that just they're not improving the music, so they don't matter.
Yeah, damn straight. Now, you mentioned it before, a long-term change in musical direction with this album. So can you elaborate on that a bit more?
Yeah, sure. So in 2018, late 2018, we put an album out called Dirge. Now Dirge was released on Talheim Records when we were signed to them, an Austrian label. And that was following up a really experimental record that we put out called The Liquid Sky. Now that was the band sort of evolving into a touring unit quite heavily at that point, and we all sat in the studio and we wrote together and we tracked everything together. Everybody tracked their own parts and tried to bring something to the table. And the songwriting on that record's pretty great, really, as far as songwriting goes. And I know that Heavy covered it as well, so it's in your review catalog somewhere. But yeah, like it just wasn't feeling right. You know, it was too eclectic. It was too unfocused. And you know, to simplify that a little bit, we just went right back to sort of what we were, you know, what do we want to do here? And we didn't want to go back into the depressive kind of black metal-y stuff straight out. So we started making a conscious effort to kind of keep the music still atmospheric, but we put like a code on it in a way. Like if the melodies weren't dark in the sense that there was some kind of twisted kind of evil diminished kind of feeling to them, then they went in the bin. And we stopped letting things come through that were sort of questionable. So Dirge, yeah, there's a track on there that I don't think fits. That would be, I can't even remember what it's called. We never played it. It's got a big like rock guitar solo in it. It's melodic. It's the eighth track on the record. I haven't listened to it since. I've skipped it. And you know, the rest of that record's pretty great. Production shithouse because the person that was meant to mix it wasn't able to mix it about 2 weeks out from the due date. So I ended up mixing it, and I'd never mixed a record, but that started that, as well as, you know, I started to become more in charge of our production. And yeah, from there it was like we did the Grand Disillusionment, which is like really filthy, strange Carpathian Forest kind of inspired 90s black metal with like a bit of a twist to it. And that's also quite crusty. And that album was pretty dirty from the start to the finish. Um, Funnily enough, when you look at our stats on like platforms where people buy music, like Bandcamp, it seems to have actually done the best, maybe because of its cult following. Um, and then we released an album called A Portrait of Sacrificial Scars after that, which was sort of, we were just trying to sum up what we'd done as a band because we knew that we weren't doing it anymore after that record. And then that album just kind of sat there blowing in the breeze for a bit, about I think 3 years or something. 3 years we were officially disbanded. And yeah, then from the EP onwards, we were like, okay, well, that album was great, so we'll leave it where it was, but it's still, you know, it was never meant to be another step forward. So we continued that Dirge Grand Disillusionment step forward, and it just got darker and more dissonant. You know, listening to a lot more bands at this stage, like Deathspell Amiga, lots of bands like, you know, Ulcerate from New Zealand, and, you know, more like avant-garde death metal, strange bands, Panzerfaust from Canada, heaps of cool bands like that, that sort of, they changed my experimentation process on the guitar and sort of got me looking at different sounds and ideas. And so this continuation of sound is us pushing that envelope into how weird can it get but still be palatable. You know, what can we do to keep it interesting for us? You know, and still sort of deliver it in this package that people know the band for. Yeah, I guess that's the best summary of it.
That's you made me understand it anyway.
Cool. Job done.
Job done. How about live shows, mate? You got any shows or tours coming up?
We do. So we've got a show in Melbourne on the last weekend of January. So that's on the Friday. I think it's the 31st of Jan. Now the next day we're playing in Sydney, and that's unannounced. So there will be a Sydney date, and I believe Penrith. Still waiting on final confirmation before that's out. But I believe the artwork has now been drafted up and everything's been sorted out. We've just done Adelaide twice. Like this year, like end of last year, this year, we've just done Adelaide twice in a row. We are coming back to Melbourne. We have also done Melbourne pretty recently as well. And with Brisbane, it's been a bit difficult because there's a great promoter there, who we talk to quite regularly, and we tried to make some stuff work, but we're in the middle of moving house, and I miscommunicated with her about the being able to confirm 100% about a date. And she was looking into it for me, and then she came back to me with the date. So this is my fault, taking it on me, but she was coming back to me with a date, and then she said, hey, we booked it, it's done. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I was actually just wondering if there are any venues available first, or you know, what's going on. So she's in our back pocket. She's a good friend of ours. We're trying. You know, otherwise there's a few festivals in Brisbane that might be nice to get on. But you probably gathered from what I was saying before, we're not really in a hurry to pack our books um, too much, especially with tour dates and things like that, because it's just, it is a strain. And I think a lot of people in Australia that aren't playing in bands don't realize that coming from WA,
Yeah.
we'd have to stay over east for a whole week or play, crappy midweek shows that, the state of living is just no one's able to go out on a Tuesday night and go to a gig anymore unless it's, huge and it's worth mortgaging a house for. But we definitely don't demand that sort of response. So yeah, it's one of those things. Like it'll all happen at one point. We'd love to get out to Tassie. We've got good contacts there. We did have Tassie dates in the works alongside this Melbourne Sydney thing, but it was just getting too packed. And we'll get there.
Get there eventually. Well, in the
Yeah.
meantime, bro, the album The Dark Enlightenment is out. So where can people get a copy of that and find out more about shows and stuff?
So it's on Bandcamp. We post semi regularly on Facebook too. We've got Instagram. Um, so if you just search Deadspace Australia anywhere, you'll pretty much find everything you need. Yeah, Bandcamp, it's available. I think at the moment, because we had to do pre-orders, then it's set at $1 for the record. But when I get off this interview, I'll go back and I'll set it to name your price, because that's just what we do for digital music. We get a lot of nice people that donate stuff, but the main thing is, like, most of the people that are really into this kind of music are living in places that they can't put much more than 20 cents into a record, and that's fine. Like, to cut them off for me just feels like, why are you playing this kind of music if you don't want people to enjoy it? Then speaking about, the sort of free option, we're on Spotify. We do quite well on Spotify, surprisingly, considering we don't really push it or endorse it publicly too much. But yeah, it's all on there. As far as show announcements go, Facebook, Instagram, we don't annoy people with mailing lists or anything like that. If you want it, come get it. And word of mouth. If we're coming somewhere and people like what we're doing and it's in your city, or then that's probably the best way to hear about anything these days.